I'm about to ride down Saunders Street in Pyrmont, and I'm going to show you what Broughton Street could have looked like when they redid it, building a cycleway. And what they could have done is put in a continuous footpath across Park Avenue and Broughton Street, but council decided not to. So I'm going to approach it firstly from the perspective of a driver, and then we're going to look at it from both directions from the perspective of a cyclist and see just what it looks like. Before we look at Saunders Street, let's think of a couple of simple principles. And the first one is it's impossible to prioritise both speed and safety, and that's reflected in the Austroads guides, where it says where you've got particular road user groups in conflict, then safety has to take priority. And speed is a critical element, and speeds must be contained so that it's safe. And Transport for New South Wales earlier this year issued this policy saying that pedestrians and cyclists need to be prioritised over vehicle traffic. Now, this design for Saunders Street was done after the Austroads guide came out, but before the Transport for New South Wales policy came out. So clearly they're following the Austroads guidance. And what I'm doing here is I'm coming out of a side street and going over the raised or the continuous footpath there. And you can see it had a pretty gentle approach, which means it's not a very steep ramp. And it had a very gentle, departure. So, it's not like a speed hump where you go bam, bam and crash over it and lose your sump or your spoiler. It's just enough to slow you down and let you know that, there's going to be pedestrians or cyclists crossing here and you need to, slow down and give way. From a cycling perspective, you just amble across here. You can see how wide it is and it's made out of brick. So the different texture indicates to drivers they've got to slow down. Now you can see here this is a nicely separated cycleway along here where they've used concrete blocks instead of a continuous curb. I guess that allows people to easily get out of their cars without tripping over the curb, etc., and use prams. Now, how would we have applied this to Broughton Street? Well, simply put, there's two crossings where this could have been done. That's Broughton Street and Park Avenue. And we actually had a meeting with some councillors on site to discuss this after the design had been finalised, and yeah, they recognised it would have been a good idea to do it, but it was too late to change anything. And of course, now that the concrete's been poured, no one's ever going to go back probably in our lifetimes and change it because, can you imagine the political fallout of, this council has just spent $1.7 million on putting in the concrete, and then they come along and jackhammer it up and put in something else. I mean, there's always people that will go absolutely ballistic at that and say, what a waste of money, what a bunch of incompetent goons, what are you doing, blah, blah, blah. Even though it's an improvement, it's still politically impossible. And there's probably no budget for it because the council had to rely on state government funds for this. So, there's going to be no internally generated funds to pay for it. So it just shows the consequences of poor design decisions up front. And, they're going to be the legacy of the current council, unfortunately, because it's going to be there for decades. So let's just have a quick look at this again. Again, from the perspective of the driver, the street hasn't really been narrowed that much, but it clearly shows that they need to be slowing down as they approach that crossing. So, look, in 2 weeks' time, council are having a little bit of a celebration in Goddard Park one afternoon, and inviting people to come along and celebrate the opening, etc. How do I feel about that? Well, I think it's a bit like giving a prize to someone that failed history. It's like it just encourages poor behaviour in the future. That you're saying, oh yeah, job well done, when it's really not a job well done. The City of Sydney, I think, is showing the way. The Inner West Council is also doing the same kind of thing. I guess even Canterbury Bankstown Council might be doing this as well. And here we can see another example in the City of Sydney area where you've got a roundabout and they've got continuous footpaths with pedestrian crossings on three arms of the roundabout, making it nice and safe for people to get across here because, well, firstly, you've got a pedestrian crossing, secondly, it's raised, and it's going to slow down drivers entering and exiting the roundabout. And obviously, if you've ever experienced some of the roundabouts in Canada Bay, exit speeds are absolutely crucial because People go into a roundabout slowly and then go flying out of it. Now, for some reason on that arm of the roundabout, there's no pedestrian crossing, but there is a raised thing there to slow drivers coming in and out of it, which makes it better. And just to give some context here, this is heading towards Sydney Uni. Again, just up the road, 100 metres away, there's another continuous footpath. And then, I guess 50 metres later, there's yet another continuous footpath. And you can see, if you notice on the left there was an elderly person walking with a cane. So that kind of thing would be an absolute boon for them. We go into Sydney Uni and we'll see multiple examples of this. So in a pedestrianised area, obviously the pedestrians are being prioritised over drivers, and it makes for a much more pleasant experience and a much safer experience. So I think Broughton Street, unfortunately, unless the state government comes to the party with some money, and I don't see why they would, it's probably going to be stuck like that forever, and we're not going to see the benefits of proper crossings. And then because it's not as safe as it could be, are parents going to allow their kids to walk to school or ride to school when they know they've got to get across two roads where they could potentially be hit by drivers? It may turn out to be a colossal waste of money thanks to those design decisions. So what do we do next? Well, I can suggest a couple of things. The first is that we ask Council to formally adopt the Transport for New South Wales policy. They could either do that by a motion at the next Council meeting or via a mayoral minute. And it really should specify that new policy from Transport for New South Wales should drive the deliberations of the Traffic Committee. Now, speaking of the Traffic Committee, I would rename the Traffic Committee. The City of Sydney is already leading the way. They actually have a local pedestrian, cycling and traffic calming committee. So they're not focused on speed of traffic, they're focused on slowing traffic down to make it a nicer place to walk and cycle around. And that they're not just obsessed about rapid traffic movement and car parking. And to that end, I would also reclassify the traffic engineers as movement engineers, because that again takes away the obsession with moving cars and trucks from one place to another to moving people and goods. And people and goods can move around by a variety of means. I mean, people can walk, people can scooter, people can cycle, goods can be moved by cargo bikes. You don't need a ute or a four-wheel drive or a truck or whatever in order to go to the chemist and pick up a small packet of pills, or drive to the cafe to have a coffee. There's all these little things that can be done every day that don't require a car. So the focus should be moved towards movement and away from traffic.